Libby Emmons from the Post Millennial. She also writes for The Federalist. She's one of my favorite guests to have on the show. Libby, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Libby, let's talk about these approval ratings. You wrote a piece about this, and you mentioned that it has tanked. His approval rating has tanked. But are you surprised at all?
No. I never had much confidence in the ability of this president to bring people together, primarily because nothing that he said at any point was designed to bring the partisan factions of our country together. So seeing these approval ratings decline is it's not surprising. And it's also not surprising that Democrats are primarily approving of his performance, and conservatives are looking at it and just saying that he's doing a terrible job, which I think he obviously is.
But let's talk about some specific parts of his performance that people are not liking. You kind of go through a lot of them, including the border. But what do you think is the biggest part where both sides kind of feel like, wow, this guy is not doing what we thought he was going to do?
I think everybody's pretty upset about the border. It was 53% total disapprove of that, including 64% of Democrats who were polled. Who was it 64%? Wait, let me just take a quick look. I had it a second ago. Let's see.
Yes, it says what Americans most like. And
64% of Democrats approve of what's going on at the border, which is a shockingly low number when you consider that 92% of Democrats approve of the pandemic, 87% approve of the handling of the pandemic, 87% approve of the handling of the economy, and only 64% approve of the handling of the border. So it's actually a rather low number. And among conservatives, it's 10% approval of the border situation. I think that's a pretty big area as well. And there was another thing too, which was that 2-1 Americans say that Biden should be willing to change his proposal to win conservative support instead of doing this steamroller thing where they just push through their agenda without any sort of Republican support. So I thought that was actually really interesting that the American people who are, smart and aware and care about their country can see what's going on and can see that this president is just running roughshod over, half the populace. And it's not pretty. And it doesn't matter if you think you're right. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you think you have like this moral perspective, this moral agenda, and that your values are the correct ones. That doesn't mean that you can, just completely steamroll half of the population. And I think what's interesting, too, is liberals used to know this, right? Of course, liberals used to know this. When we had Newt Gingrich and we had the new Christian right in the 90s, and they were able to push through, I think, a fair bit of stuff without presidential approval, leftists knew that, just because you think you're right isn't a good enough reason to dictate how the country is going to be run. I think the president would be wise to take note of that.
And something, Libby, you just mentioned is that he's running roughshod over Congress and he's just kind of steamrolling his fellow politicians. And I noticed his little trick with that is that he'll say, and I crack up every time he says it, he says, I have Republican voters on my side, as if the Republican voters don't agree with, what their representatives are doing. And I just keep thinking to myself, who are these, regular people in America who are Republican, who are agreeing with Joe Biden? And the only people I can think of is someone like Jennifer Rubin. But besides that, I don't know any conservatives who are sitting at home and going, well, I know Congress doesn't agree with him, but I actually do.
I'm not seeing that either. And I spend a fair bit of time with conservatives, mostly media conservatives, but, also some in my family. And I'm not seeing any kind of indication that he's doing a good job. And I think that part of that, too, is that he's not upholding any traditional conservative values at all. I don't even think he's upholding any liberal values. I think he's trying to operate by executive fiat, right down to this whole thing about the Supreme Court, talking about having formed this commission to study expanding the Supreme Court. after decades of saying that Supreme Court expansion was a terrible idea. And it's only being done as a means to consolidate power. They've got the Congress, they've got the executive office, and now they want the court. And it's just it's like a corporate monopolization of leftism at the executive levels. And it would be hard to overturn that. It would be hard to, what would the next Republican president do? Just expand the court more?
Right.
How many people are we going to have up there?
Exactly. It's kind of never ending. I saw people saying, why just add 4? Why not add 400? What's the difference? Libby,
yes, what is the difference?
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I know that these were written by Katie Daviscourt from the Post Millennial, but you are one of the editors there, so I know you have a good take on it. Let's talk about the Academy Awards. I'm not going to ask you what actually happened at them because based off the ratings, it wouldn't seem like anyone really cares. But what I want to talk a little bit about...
cares. I watched the whole thing, actually, all of that Oscar coverage. That was Katie Daviscourt, Ari Hoffman, and I just going through everything and being like, write this, let's cover this.
You watched all 3 hours?
Together. Oh, my goodness. I was actually in Milwaukee for a Better Discourse event with Mythicist, which is this really cool conservative... Well, I guess they're not really conservative, but they're a culture group, and they're sort of like pushing new ideas and interesting speakers. So I was there, and I actually ordered Thai food and posted up in my hotel room and watched all 3 hours of the Oscars.
Gosh. Well, before I ask you about that, which sounds treacherous, and I give you major kudos for sitting through it, I do want to ask a little bit about the preparation for the Oscars, because you guys at the Post Millennial were doing a lot of reporting on this. I'm speaking with Libby Emmons. And let's talk first. I don't know which one makes me scratch my head more. Let's talk first about the homeless issue. So where this was in LA, there was a lot of homeless people, and let people know what Los Angeles decided to do about that before the Oscars came to town.
Yeah, so there were 2 venues where the Oscars were this year, and they kind of bounced back and forth between the two. One of them was Union Station, which is typically used as it's often been used as a set for films. But also it had a large homeless population camped out around it. And the city, much like cities do in the lead up to big events, they moved all of the homeless people out of the area so that it wouldn't look so bad. But what makes that specifically disturbing, and it happens in New York, it happens in, New Orleans, it happens all over the place. But what makes that specifically disturbing is that then you had this massively activist overtone to the artists and entertainers that were presenting and accepting awards. So they go up there and they're talking all about social justice without making any acknowledgement that the city cleared a bunch of people without places to live out of the area to benefit the opulence of these celebrities discussing social justice.
Yeah, and you in this piece by Katie Daviscourt, she quotes one of the homeless residents, and he says, "They came to us about a week ago saying that we had to move by Friday at 6 p.m. because they were trying to clean up for the Oscars, and they told us that if we didn't move, they were going to just demolish our stuff."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Really kind of cruel. And then on top of that, Libby, let's talk about the walls, because I always thought that liberals were not fans of walls, but let my audience know that things have changed.
Yeah, Katie pointed that out as well, and I thought that was a brilliant perspective that she had. So you have everyone saying no border walls, but policed walls around the venue where I'm going to be in my Louis Vuitton couture gown. That's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. So, yeah, they erected a lot of fencing around the red carpet, keep all the riffraff out, make sure that everybody got to, go into the Oscars in style so that they could tell us how garbage our country is and how police suck. So, yay, Well done, everybody. The other thing, too, that a lot of people noticed on social media, I think we had a piece on this, too. There was a lot going on last night. But another thing that happened, too, was with the COVID restrictions, everybody was vaccinated, everybody was tested, everyone had their temperatures taken, everyone was supposed to put their masks on and all of this stuff when they weren't shooting. I believe it was Viola Davis who compared the presentation to a film set, saying, we put the masks on between takes, which is very similar to Gavin Newsom's "put the mask on between bites." Remember that one?
Right.
Brilliant. So they did that, but like there really was something so. The word outrageous is overused, but I think it's overused for a reason these days. There was something so outrageous about wealthy celebrities trotting around an area where the homelessness had been cleared out for their benefit, wearing beautiful clothes, which I always love the clothes at the Oscars. That's the thing that I mostly like to tune in for. But wearing these beautiful outfits, accepting awards, giving each other awards. Glenn Close got up and did the butt, I believe.
Yeah, I saw that.
In like a moment that was the most cringe moment I think I have ever seen in my life, other than this kid singing a love song to Fauci this morning, which happened to cross my feed. But yeah, so here they are, and the contrast was amazing. Opulence, wealth, telling us our country sucks, while being elevated by it, by our nation, being protected by it, and then giving each other awards for films that no one had seen. I looked at the list of films, and I was like, I haven't seen these. I went to look for, I saw Marvel films and stuff like that. I saw WandaVision. But I went to look for where these films had premiered, which I thought was interesting. They had primarily premiered online on different streaming services. So to watch these films, you would have had to sign up for HBO Max, Hulu, Amazon Prime, rented stuff from iTunes, signed up for Netflix. There was one film, I want to say it was Minari, I don't know if it was, but that ended up on its very own private streaming service because they didn't have distribution or something like that. All of these films in past years, each one of these would have been independent films. A bunch of them premiered at Sundance. There were no big blockbusters, really. And the other thing, too, that the Oscars did in preparation for the awards this year was back in September, they changed the guidelines for the nominations for films. And these requirements are basically diversity quotas,
right,
to ensure that, Black American, basically, the idea was to ensure that Black American artists got their due. And as we know, like, Black culture is a hugely beneficial, it's like this major cultural movement in the United States, and it's actually, pretty amazing. But even with all of these diversity quotas, the two major Black films of the night, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is, of course, from a famous play, and the story about Fred Hampton, Judas and the Black Messiah, that premiered on Netflix, neither of these got the big awards. So on the one hand, I thought the diversity quotas were garbage and that films should be elevated on their artistic merits. On the other hand, they didn't even work.
Right. Exactly.
So what's that about? And that's weird.
Libby, I just want to say, and we do have to run here, this is Libby Emmons from the Post Millennial. Everybody should check her out on Twitter. I actually have her Twitter right here, at Libby Emmons, EMMONS. As far as the Oscars go, I'm like you. I love the dresses. I used to love watching them, the award shows. But there really does seem to be, and people will blame the pandemic for the ratings, but I almost think the pandemic made people aware of just how stupid and out of touch and unnecessary these celebrities are. So they're going to say, oh, well, it's because there wasn't as many movies and people, it's the pandemic. And really, it's like, no, people just are actually, we've said for decades that, oh, we don't care what these celebrities think. Oh, don't get up and lecture us. But this seems like the first, maybe the second year where people said, no, I really don't care. Like, I don't care so much that I'm not going to go near it. Exactly.
Yes. The ratings were substantially down from last year as well. And yeah, nobody's seen the films. And the films, each one of these films was so much more about it being an important film. This is an important film, as opposed to like, hey, this is going to be a great film to watch. I cannot wait to have the experience of seeing this movie.
Yeah, I actually want to watch it.
Is that experience. I want to watch it because I'm going to have a great time watching this film.
Exactly. Libby Emmons, thank you so much for joining the show. We'll have you on again soon. Once again, guys, that's Libby Emmons from the Post Millennial. The Biden administration's policies and executive orders are already causing some economic disturbance. You heard Libby talking about that a little earlier. Tax laws are going to change. Your tax burden on selling real estate will grow. I hear people talk about this almost once a week. Someone has some sort of property that they're wondering, should I try to get out now? Should I try to sell it? Well, don't get caught flat-footed and squander the equity in your real estate built up over years or even decades. Sell today with J.J. Manning. For over 40 years, J.J. Manning has been the leading auction house in New England. From high-end homes to estates to commercial properties throughout New England, J.J. Manning can get your property sold fast and contingency-free. There's a big reason why Mass Lawyers Weekly voted J.J. Manning #1 for 4 consecutive years in a row, because they still have a huge following of bidders who pay cash. When you sell with the broker, you pay the commission, but in an auction, the buyer pays. These are treacherous times in the real estate market. Some sectors are at all-time highs. Others are losing ground. Don't wait until Joe Biden destroys this sector of the economy too before you cash out. To learn more on how to get your property sold fast, contact Charlie Gill at jjmanning.com. With over 16,000 sales and satisfied clients, you could be the next one. Call them today at 1-800-521-0111 or go to jjmanning.com. This is Grace. This is the Grace Curley Show. We'll be right back.
She's never held office, but she paid the whiskey priest's monthly rent once. She's Grace Curley.